Hello all friends, welcome to this new video dedicated to the guides and tips of 2 Genesis mutants. We're going to see lots of things. We're going to see how to create a deck with what could appear to be a mana curve, except that here, we're not going to focus on how many starter mutants, how many at least basic mutants, heroic, etc. and buildings. We are going to see a little bit of PvE. We are going to see which card is better in PvE. Finally, in short, we are going to see lots of tips which will be very pleasant to understand the game and to be the best possible. I leave you with a little intro and we'll see you again. Thank you all. Okay friends, let's meet directly on the battlefield so that I can show you a little bit of the tips when you start in PvP. When I say you start, it is when you are the first player to start. There are a few cards in particular that ensure we have a perfect start. I am talking in particular about bio-recyclable. When you are the first player to play, this is just a must, since it allows you to destroy one of your mutants. And so, given that you are the first to play, there are no mutants opposite, so you do not redistribute Evo. Besides, note that evolution, points of evolution, we will talk about it again later. For now, bio-recyclable, destroy one of your mutants, draw 2 cards. When you're first, you can do just that. You recycle your card. Evolution points are not distributed. You draw 2 cards. This is truly one of the best starters you can make when you're first starting out. Also note, when you start you can afford, for example, to lay buildings. Let me explain. Data extraction has 3 PV. Alright? Today, right now, there are very few mutants who can afford to hit 3 damage directly on their own. Which means that if I want to put it like that and an opponent does that to you, there is only one solution for you to literally destroy the databank. It is to use at least 1 explosion, which is 2 points of damage, with at least 1 mutant doing 1 point of damage. Knowing that all the starter mutants in the game do at least 1 point of damage. This is the only way for you to get a databank that was placed in the first round. Which is a bit annoying because if you use an explosion just for a databank at the very beginning of the game, you sacrifice a potential card to deal with a mutant that will come during the game. So yes, if you have the opportunity, put the databank in the first round and thus play your bio-recycling also in the first round. These are really 2 cards that I can advise you to use in the first turn. Besides, we will see directly if he has an answer or not. Will he use an explosion or not? Or will he succeed? If he uses an explosion, no luck for him, no luck because he will simply sacrifice. There you go. An explosion. That's what I was saying. He is obliged to use a... Well, it's the bot, obviously, but versus a real player, he would have exploded the databank and he would have destroyed your databank. Well, he didn't do it because it's the bot, but a real player would have done it. The problem is that if you make an explosion at the very beginning of the game, You simply risk discarding an explosion which could potentially deal with an enemy creature, which will cause you problems during the game. So, pose there twice before making an explosion on an opposing building that the opponent posed in the first turn. We're going a little further into the part to show you a little bit of the evolution, and you'll see it's super interesting. Okay friends, so here I would like to draw your attention to the points of evolution. If you have mastered the evolution points, then you have partly mastered the game. And that's going to be ultra important to master the points of evolution. You should know that when you start the game, one of the hardest aspects to master, the hardest to understand, is the evolution points. Evolution points dominate the game, and at all times, you have to work around these evolution points. Now I'm going to explain how evolution points work, because yes, evolution points are not random. Yes, the evolution points are not random. That is to say that automatically you can have control over the points of evolution. You can know to whom the evolution points will be transmitted, and you'll see. I'll explain that to you right away. Here, take a good look at the following table from here. I have units at 2, 2, units at 0, 1, units at 1, 2, 2, 4, 0, 1. This one is already silver rank, and he needs 3 points of evolution. This is a basic rank. It needs an evolution point to evolve. We have the enemy who has one of 2 bronzes and he is missing more than 1 evolution point to evolve. And we have Horus, who obviously has 2 evolution points to have in order to evolve. What will happen is that I will sacrifice one of my units, the 0, 1, on an enemy. So I'm going to distribute an evolution point to an enemy. Who do you think this evolution point will be distributed to? I'll let you think for 2 seconds. Okay, the 2 seconds have passed. You have thought. At worst, you pause and think. The evolution point will be transmitted to the demoness. Why is this the case? Look, I sacrifice my unit. She's going to go to the demoness. How did I know? How could I know she was going directly on the demoness, and quite simply because she was already on the verge of evolving? That is to say that the game system favors mutants on the verge of evolving, or at least those who have much more advanced progression. You should know that if you have a mutant with already evolution points and who is about to evolve, then give priority to this mutant. If, in this scenario, you have a silver mutant and a bronze mutant, knowing that bronze is there, okay? And the silver mutant is here. According to you, if I sacrifice my unit, which will give an evolution point, who will be given the evolution point this time? I repeat, it is not random, and we always favor the most advanced. It's okay. Do you have it? Let's go see if you have it. I will sacrifice my unit. Obviously it was the Horus. Why was it Horus? Because he only has 2 evolution points to evolve. Do you understand? That is to say that each time we favor the one who will evolve first. Did you understand? So there, if I sacrifice my 0, 1 again, who will benefit from the evolution point? To Horus. Obviously, look. And there it was, because he was about to evolve. See, we can have this control. We can know when a unit is going to receive evolution. And knowing how to master this evolution is knowing how to master the game. You must master the game and the evolutions. Okay, friends, we're going to move on to another aspect of the game. Another tip to know. You see the building, the adverse psychosis. We have a small one, and we especially have a light. When you incubate a mutant, there is a light. What does this light correspond to? It simply corresponds to the genes that the mutant has. That is to say, the colors. If he incubated, for example, a mutant which had these two genes, that is to say the purple gene and the brown gene, we would have a brown and purple color code. Alright, so there, knowing the cards and knowing their genes is predicting the future. Predicting the future means being one step ahead of your enemy, and it allows us to prepare and know what we need to do to be best prepared for the map that will come out. Let's imagine there, he is mystical. He's going to incubate something more than one, so it's bound to be a heroic one that's going to come out. A heroic one with only one color. So we'll go straight to looking at the possibilities there are. And you will understand why it is important to know colors and genes. So we said, it was more than one, so it must be heroic. And we said there was only one color. If I look at the unowned cards, only one suit. Do you see where I'm going with this? He was going to release the J Omega. Because it's the only heroic card in the game that is uniquely mystical. If it was mystical space, you could say it had a singularity mage that was going to intervene in the game. If it had a mystique and silliness in terms of colors, you could say there was this card that was going to appear. If there were mystique and necro, we could say that obviously the lady was going to appear. So knowing the colors that there are on mutants means being able to predict what your opponent is going to play. And therefore, having a head start, it works exactly the same for advanced cards. You know, for example, depending on the archetype that your opponent plays, we can deduce certain things. And this deduction comes with experience, but as long as you don't know that, you can't have that experience. You really have to know this and go into the deck editor, look at what's playing and take it into account from now on. Try to remember who has which gene, and you'll see that it's super important, and it will change a lot of things for you because knowledge is power. Besides, friends, now that we are in the deck editor, it is time to tell you about decks, how to build a deck. What are the tips for building a deck? There aren't really any tricks to building a deck per se, but there are things that will be found in all decks, potentially. Cards that are a bit, let's say, necessary for the good construction, for the good progress of a game, depending on the decks that we find. Alright. So let's admit I take a deck, any deck. There is a card that we will find all the time. Obviously, it is genetic cycling. All decks must have at least 3 genetic cycles because drawing is extremely important in this game. You have to draw. In general, I use genetic cycling. I use biorecycling for the start of the game. I explain to you the why and how. I always put explosions, super important. I always put at least one orbital strike in a deck because it's super important. Toxic leak, it's important, but you will see that, for example, having cheating, and well, for its part, it is not necessarily a good thing to have it, because if you play a deck which is aggro, you start from the principle that you will have more units if you assume that you are playing aggro, and therefore your duty is to overwhelm the enemy with your units to destroy it as quickly as possible. Then you can remove the cheat, since you will always be outnumbered compared to your opponent if obviously you have good control of aggression. So cheating? Not always. Void Portal, on the other hand, is something very effective that I like to put in all my decks. Void Portal is a must-have, so that's a bit of the cards to have, mainly. When you build a deck, these are really so-called generic cards. These are cards that can be found in all decks and which work with any type of deck. Apart from cheating, obviously. Okay, in PvE, for example, I like to put burn. I know that I am one of the only people in the game to burn when I play in PvE, but quite simply because you inflict 2 points of burn on all your mutants. Alright? I generally like to start with a burn and a small explosion. That's it. Because you are facing a 2, 2 and a 2, 3, you burn the 2, 2 will automatically die in the next turn and you explode. The 2, 3 will also die in the next turn due to damage fire and preserve 2 health points for your unit. That's not much, but 2 health points can make the difference in PvE and I like working like that. Also, note something. Look at the curve a little. 2, 3, 3, 6, 26. Do you think it's strong? Do you think it's good? Well, I'm going to show you the curves a little bit. The curves of the decks I have. That's an aggro deck. Alright, an aggro deck. I have 3, 3, 0, 11, and 23. 11 buildings, 23 supports, and only 3 basic, 3 advanced, and yet it's an aggro deck. So it's really going to depend. I will take, for example, my Murel V15 deck, which is a control deck. I have 5, 7, 0, 9, 19. It's a control deck. I'm going to take another deck that is also control. I'm 7, 5, 1, 6, 21. Each time there is something that catches our eye. I have a lot more support and building cards than I have advanced or basic ones. Simply because in this game, buildings and supports are something that you, as a beginner, can put aside. But in reality, these are the strongest cards, knowing that you lose a turn for each mutant you summon to advance. It's important to protect. It's important to draw. And it's important to manage. And this management is provided by building cards and support cards. It is not necessarily the units that fight. So you should never neglect buildings and supports. If I go to another deck, Necro, I have 6, 9, 0, 6, 10, 9. I always have more supports than basic and advanced maps. And I have a somewhat special deck, a deck that plays around heroics. Know that when you play decks with heroics, that you play decks that highlight heroics, there is no point in having a lot of advances in your deck in general. I revolve around 6 advanced cards, given that I put 3 heroics. See, I have 3. And well, I can say to myself that I remove 3 advances in favor of 3 heroics. So if in general I have 6 advances, I simply remove 3 advances to put them in heroic. On the other hand, some buildings will be needed, in particular guards or others, to be able to shield generator. There I played the shield generator rather than the guardians. It's a strategy like any other. It saves me from using guardians and I can play a little more basic. This is for the benefit of buildings. You see, for example, I have 2 guards there. Anyway, it's what you want. It's a question of taste and color. I did it like that. This deck is really not optimized. He can be... Besides, I'm going to rework it. I will rework it because it is not optimized and I have my little idea to make it a little better. So, now that I have a little more experience, I can do it. But mainly to create a deck, you will always need more buildings and supports than basic, advanced, or heroic cards. It's extremely important to know how to manage, to know how to draw, to know how to destroy the mutants that are causing you problems, to seek out certain cards, for example the Heroic Call. There you have it, which is a support card that allows you to look for the heroic. This allows you to always have something to play for, always to have an associated defense, or an aggression precisely. Also, there is something I wanted to talk to you about. In this scenario, I see a lot of people in PvE who don't wait for everyone to finish. Denki Gamma, which I remind you, is the best PvE card in the game until we find something better, which will be particularly complicated since it is so great that this card is simply incredible. You have to have it in PvE. It's the best PvE card in the game. Nekigama, what does she say? Discard 2 cards, inflict X damage on the opposing entity. Target the number of damage being the number of allied mutants on all lands. No. When you are facing the Goliath, wait until all players have placed their starter unit. Alright? Because if you don't play all your mutants, you lose damage. Let's imagine that he doesn't play and he doesn't play. Then I lose 2 points of damage. And on top of that, he doesn't recover the calves, since when you simply kill the opposing mutant, the Goliath, all the value points are redistributed among all the characters. So, it's important, really important, that when you find yourself facing the Goliath, the first reaction you have to have is to put down your mutants so that they can on the one hand serve as a damage point, and on the other part of being able to collect the evolution points left by the Goliath.